story that's called The Goose Girl, although really it's about a princess and a talking horse. I don't think we've met a talking horse before in our journey through the Brothers Grimm stories, although there are quite a lot of talking horses in Irish myth and legend. There's once a princess whose father had died many years before. When the time came for the princess to travel to a distant land, to marry the prince to whom she was betrothed, her mother was very sad to see her go. So she took a needle and stabbed her finger and let 3 drops of blood fall onto a handkerchief, which she placed in her daughter's pocket. And her daughter set off on a horse named Falada, who was able to speak. And accompanying her was a chambermaid on a horse which really you could only call a nag. And as they travelled along through the heat of the day, the princess said, "Oh, I'm so thirsty. Fetch me some water from the stream." The chambermaid said, "I'm not your servant. If you want water, you must fetch it yourself." So the princess dismounted from her horse, went to the stream, and drank her fill. And the 3 drops of blood on her handkerchief said, "If only your mother could see you, her heart would surely break in two." The day was hot and the day was long, and again the princess said, "Fetch me some water from the stream." The chambermaid said, "If you want water, you can fetch it yourself." So the princess dismounted from Falada, her magical talking horse, went down to the stream. And then the chambermaid said, "I will kill you unless you exchange clothes with me and exchange horses with me. And you must swear an oath here beneath the open sky that you will never tell anyone what has happened." And so the princess, who was a humble woman, feeling that she had no choice, agreed to the chambermaid's demands. And by the time they reached the new land, the new castle, the chambermaid introduced herself to the prince as his future bride. And she pointed to the true princess, the true bride, and said, "This is my maid. Can you find something for her to do?" So the princess, the true bride, was sent off with the goose boy to tend the goose every day. And the false bride became worried that perhaps Falada, the talking horse, would be able to tell people what had really happened and the truth would be revealed. So she said to the prince, her betrothed, "Can you do something for me? Can you find a butcher to cut the head off that horse? It was terrible on the way here. It's awful to ride." And the prince agreed, although it seemed a strange request. This is a beautiful horse. Word reached the true bride, the goose girl, that her horse was due to be slaughtered. So she gave a gold coin to the butcher, in return for which he placed Falada's head above the gate through which the true bride and the goose boy walked every day. And so the next day and the day after that, when they passed under the gate, the true bride said to her horse, "Oh, Falada, it is so sad to see you hanging there." And the horse's head replied, "Oh, my princess, if your mother could see you now, her heart would surely break in two." And so this carried on. And when they got to the field where the geese grazed, the true bride would take off her hat and comb and braid her hair, and the goose boy was so struck by her beautiful flaxen hair that he went to try and pluck some. And in order to stop him doing this, the princess called up the wind, said, "Oh, wind, blow, blow the goose boy's hat away." And so a wind would appear from nowhere, blow the goose boy's cap from his head, and he would be obliged to run across the field until he had caught up with his cap, by which time the princess, the true bride, would have finished combing and braiding her hair. And after some time, the goose boy went to the king and said, "Can you take the goose girl away? She is so difficult to work with. She bullies me every day." The king asked him to explain. And the goose boy said, "Every day she talks to the horse's head as we go under the gate, and the horse's head replies and says if her mother could see her, her heart would break in two. And then every day she combs and braids her beautiful flaxen hair." The king was intrigued by this, so the next day he followed the two of them and the geese through the gate, and he saw indeed for himself that the horse replied to the princess. The king hid behind a bush and watched the princess combing her beautiful flaxen hair, and he was struck by her beauty and thought she would make a good wife for my son. And the king invited the goose girl to his chambers and said, "Tell me your story." But the princess said, "I swore an oath beneath the open skies I cannot." So the king said, "Go to the stove and tell your story to the stove. That won't break your oath." So the princess told her whole story about the handkerchief, about her mother's 3 drops of blood, about how she had been forced to change her clothes and her horse with the chambermaid who became the false bride, and how she had lost the handkerchief with her mother's drops of blood on in the river. And the king listened. And the king knew that this was true. So he arranged for the princess to be tended by women, to be bathed, her hair to be washed and braided, and for her to be dressed in beautiful clothes. And a banquet was held, and the prince sat between the false bride and his true betrothed, the true princess, who now looked so dazzling in her finery that the chambermaid, the false bride, didn't recognise her. And the king said to the false bride, "What sentence would you pass on a woman who tricked her own princess?" And the false bride, believing that she was going to marry the prince and she was going to be queen, said, "I would have her stripped and placed in a barrel with nails on the inside, and I would have 2 white horses drag the barrel through the streets until she was dead." And the king said, "You are the false woman. You have pronounced your own sentence." When the sentence had been carried out, the prince married his princess, and later they ruled the kingdom in peace and harmony and lived a long and happy life together, as of course I hope shall all of you. I think that's one of the stories that probably has roots which go back a very, very long way, because of course the whole thing about the power of blood, or perhaps the power of royal blood, and the whole thing about talking horses and talking heads, of course, that appears time and time again in very many stories. So, hope to see you again soon for more stories and more talking heads. Take care.